Welcome to Seeking the Sacred Self. I'm your host, Naomi Rozak. This is part 2 of a 2-part series, A Compassionate View of the Victim. Go back and listen to episode 1 if you want to hear more of my personal story and a description of what a victim is, what it feels like to be one, and why we can be so harsh towards people who show the symptoms of being a victim, and what that sometimes means about our own pain and wounds. I ended last week's episode with the plea to find a more compassionate view of the victim and the person who is reactive to people in a victim state. So let's keep going. Today, let's look at what it feels like to be the adult after the victimizing trauma, which can be from ongoing environment that takes away one's power, safety, and choice, or from a specific difficult event. For me, it was both, beginning with my parents' divorce, and then ongoing because of the religious restrictions on what I could experiment with or make choices in. So for me, at age 7 and onward, the high conflict in our house after my parents' divorce was intolerable. It made me want to scream. I felt like I couldn't stay in my body when any conflict happened. I lost my power to stay in the moment and respond to the moment, to stay connected to myself and navigate through conflict. I simply no longer had the presence to be able to feel what was happening and to see what was happening and choose any kind of rational response. I both numbed or disconnected from my feelings and hid away from people, and I quit showing the true me. And the result is that as an adult, I avoided conflict. I felt powerless when conflict happened in relationships, and I had also experienced that it felt like other people could do anything verbally or emotionally to or around me, and there was nothing I could say or do to protect myself or to share my experience. Going through conflict was an experience of terror and, heart beating fast and being frozen in my body and not being able to act. And so it felt like my only choice was to avoid it at every opportunity. Someone could say something about me to me or accuse me of something, and I might try to defend myself, but it always felt like I was scrabbling up a dirt hill and not making any headway. Like I couldn't make them listen, and it didn't seem to help at all. And I didn't know that I could say, actually, that's untrue about me. Here's the truth. Please ask me questions instead of making assumptions. It would never have occurred to me that I had any power in those situations to get a better or more helpful result out of conflict or for my life. So victimhood can feel a lot like defensiveness, like all these pointy, sharp arrows are coming at you all the time, and you have to keep dodging because to get hit with one would feel like the end of the world. But then you always live in fear and dragged down because the world will never feel safe enough for you to just be a person and feel better. What I am promoting in both last episode and this one is compassion, both for those who experience life as victims and those who struggle with people who are victims. And in either case, the answer is to get a little bit more curious, ask for support if you need it, and start to look below the surface and get in touch with the feelings that are going on and where they come from. So, are you triggered by a victim mindset? By someone who complains, who doesn't seem to do anything about their circumstances? Does that person get under your skin? If your emotions get really high or you feel really reactive, impatient, or angry, like you don't have time for this and they should just quit being so frustrating, we want to ask why this brings up so much emotion for you. You may have had someone in your past who you really needed to act on your behalf, like a parent who you needed to protect you or provide for you, or someone in your life who always was complaining and you had to put up with it because you were a kid, or someone who was supposed to be the adult and the stronger one, who always seemed to complain and play the victim and ask for you to soothe and take care of them. And you had to put up with it and give it because you were a kid and that was the person who was supposed to be your safety and your caregiver. But now that you're an adult, you're certainly not going to subject yourself to that again, right? Someone who is impatient with a victim, for them, it may be that they're not comfortable being vulnerable or have never been given the space to not have to perform and achieve and take control. They may have been punished or chided for inactivity or resting or laying around as a child and always been told to get up and contribute. They may have had their feelings shut down by others. They may have been told, oh, wah, 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 go cry somewhere else, or I'll give you something to cry about. Or I don't care about what you feel, just figure it out on your own. They may be uncomfortable with taking time and space for themselves. So you might want to ask yourself if you were allowed to complain as a child, if you were allowed to rest, if you were allowed to have burdens and difficulties, or who in your life seemed to always draw attention to themselves and sucked the energy out of a room, and how that felt for you as the child. Or whether you were ever honored for something other than the work that you gave in your home. Did you know that by going deeper into that pain, you can also free yourself from the burden of reacting to others and dismissing them in that way? It's just a journey. There's no pressure to do this. We all have many layers of healing that we work through when the building blocks are in place and when we're ready. I want to share a personal story of how I once felt dismissed as a victim. I was in a healing type session, and at the time I shared with the professional how I had lost my community when I left the Message Church. And the person said something like, "Lost? But you chose to leave. You're not a victim." And I sensed in that moment that this person had a little bit of judgment for me there. They were not able to hold space for my very great loss of community and relationship from leaving the church. And so I couldn't heal that piece there. And they couldn't comprehend my pain because they had a trigger about people being victims. So here's the facts. I did feel victimized by the loss because what I chose to leave was the church building and the church doctrine. But what had happened is the teaching, that very doctrine of the church, affects relationships. It teaches people not to have relationships outside the church. It teaches that worldly people are sinful and will be destroyed one day, and the only time we reach out to them is to try to win them into the church. Or if people leave, you kind of have a motive when you reach out to them. You want them to come back, right? But this is not the regular Christian experience. This is what happens only in these more extreme groups. And so this complete loss of community after leaving a church like that is something understood only by those who have left that kind of church. And when I decided to leave, I didn't know. I only guessed what might happen with relationships. And I really had a hope in my heart that I could keep some of those friendships. And then in the hours and days and weeks, as the news got out that we were leaving, it felt like people just disappeared on me. They were just gone. My phone was silent. Nothing was happening. There were a couple of kind of gracious conversations, but also a realization in my heart that this isn't going to work. Like, we're going to be on two really different pages, you know? And then there was one conversation where someone I loved dearly looked me in the eye and accused me of something, and that relationship ended there at the table in a coffee shop that day. And so, like, that was difficult. That hurt. So while this professional in the healing session was right, I had made that choice. What they couldn't realize was the fallout from that choice wasn't one that I knew for sure. It was not part of the original choice. It was part of the fallout of that choice. So I had left the church, but I wasn't trying to leave the people. And then Actually, not that long ago, I heard that person share how they had discovered they struggled with people in a victim mindset, and they were recognizing their own unhealed parts, and they were working on healing that and shifting that, which was really helpful for me to hear. So, in healing their own perspective, that person had work to do. And then for me as a victim, I also had work to do. Part of my work was to heal the loss of relationship, of leaving the church, by grieving it and honoring that grief. There is a truth here. I did lose a whole community. And even the few relationships I kept, like my family relationships, they shifted forever. And that was difficult and deserves to be acknowledged. But as time went by and as I kept healing and digging deeper, there was more to learn, more truth there. One of them is that more people were involved in that situation and that conflict than just me. They could have acted too. So there's a dual responsibility here. And then there's more that they were also probably confused by my behavior as someone who had been faithful in the church and loved it. And also that the church doctrine itself bears more responsibility than me and the others who were influenced by it. And then there's more nuanced truth, more nuanced realizations that these people most likely felt abandoned by me. Maybe they were waiting for me to reach out. And I did try in a couple of circumstances and didn't get any response. And there's not much I can do about that. And then there's the truest truth that layers through all of it. And this is kind of a broad, healed perspective that neither myself nor the people I was dealing with back then had the emotional intelligence and the communication and relational tools to navigate a huge thing like someone leaving a church, someone that you love. We were all hurting. I was hurting so badly at this loss that any little thing would have made me feel reactive and defensive, and I probably wouldn't have been able to truly be part of those relationships for a time anyway. And so what happened simply happened. I had not wanted to hurt anyone. I did not want to be hurt, but I did have to make the choice to leave the church and its doctrine, and I lost things and suffered because of that. But a lot of this understanding is something I came to years down the road, literal years. And here's the piece that other people might not see and that I have to honor. That I entered into that conflict when I left the church with the powerlessness of a 7-year-old girl that watched her whole family change and feel unsafe after her parents' divorce. So in some ways, it felt like I didn't stand a chance of navigating this larger scale divorce from my church family, especially in the conflict afterwards when people were struggling with my choice. All the avoidance signals in my body were screaming for me to run away. So healing a story of victimhood in our lives is deep, personal work, one that requires a very gentle view of the self and of all that happened. And it's often many small realizations and integrations that build on each other. It's really going deep. It's understanding that the way we feel is legitimate. We get to feel that way. We get to own it, feel into all the corners of it. It is our story. We need to know and comprehend that power was stripped away and we no longer feel connected to it. We don't feel that we can respond appropriately to certain things. We don't feel that we have choices. We don't feel in control of our lives or our emotions or our behavior or our reactions. And then, as we get tired of that, as we decide we want to change something, we want to feel better, even if we don't know what we're aiming for or what we want, we just want something better, then we go on a journey. We start recognizing and grieving the losses. We pull back the pieces of us that were scattered away or disconnected from during that powerless event or environment. we practice incorporating these new realizations that we're having. We make new connections and new ideas inside of ourselves, and we start to comprehend a world where things feel a little bit better and where we might be able to regain some of what we've lost. We reconnect to our sacred core, and the core of us starts to teach us that we can be calm and confident and creative and responsive at any moment, that we can find our personal power. It's already flowing through us. It's already flowing through you and me already. We have simply lost our bridge, our sense of how to be in touch with it. So understand, this is not about fixing you because there's something wrong with you. Fixing is a difficult energy for our bodies. Our bodies never want to be fixed. They want to be seen and heard. You are perfectly worthy of love, perfectly acceptable as you are right now, and you can continue the rest of your life this way, the way you are right now, if that's what you want to do. Our bodies are so tired of us thinking they're wrong all the time and shaming them and judging them and trying to fix them. We don't have to judge the state we're in. We can accept it and love it and see if it wants to shift. And if we want something more, if we want to grow into something that feels better, we can start moving towards that. I want to leave you a list of what is called the Personal Bill of Rights. This has nothing to do with country or government, but the inherent soul rights within an individual as a person on this earth. I wish I had found them years ago, as many of them I certainly couldn't even comprehend were part of my personal rights. And it took me a long time to scratch out that information on my own. These are adapted from the Anxiety and Phobia Workbook, 1990, by Edmund J. Byrne, PhD. As I read them, listen and see if perhaps you might want to start on a journey to reclaim any of these rights for yourself. Here they are. I have the right to ask for what I want. I have the right to refuse requests or demands I can't meet. I have the right to express all of my feelings, both positive or negative, in a manner that will not harm others. I have the right to change my mind. I have the right to make mistakes and not have to be perfect. I have the right to follow my own values and standards. I have the right to say no to anything when I feel I am not ready, it is unsafe, or it violates my values. I have the right to determine my own priorities. I have the right to not be responsible for others' behavior, actions, feelings, or problems. I have the right to expect honesty from others. I have the right to feel angry at someone I love and to express this in a responsible manner. I have the right to be uniquely myself. I have the right to feel scared and say, I'm afraid. I have the right to say, I don't know. I have the right to not give excuses or reasons for my behavior. I have the right to make decisions based on my feelings, beliefs, and values. I have the right to my own needs for personal space and time. I have the right to be playful and frivolous. I have the right to be healthier than those around me. And just so there's no misunderstanding here, like this could be tricky because I'm talking about no moral superiority, no spiritual superiority. But what this is talking about is that when we do want to heal and we want to contribute to making our own life better, that can often be uncomfortable for people around us, and they will give uncomfortable reactions. They might try to pull us backward or sabotage the choices we're making. They might criticize us. And regardless, you still have the right to invest in your health. The next one, I have the right to be in a non-abusive environment. I have the right to make friends and be comfortable around people. I have the right to change and grow. I have the right to have my needs and wants respected by others. I have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. I have the right to be happy. Honestly, I don't even know what to say after that. There is such personal power in those statements, such vitality. If we could buy into them and live with those realizations, our whole world could shift in such a dynamic way. My God. So I'm curious if any of those resonated with you. There are one or two there that feel a little challenging for me, where I have to sit with them a bit and be like, do I really believe that? Does that really resonate with me? What might I be missing in my understanding? Did you think, wow, I don't even know if that one's true. I can't comprehend what it would be like to live like that. Or maybe you felt a bit curious, like you'd like to explore one or a few of those statements for yourself. The struggle I had, in the depression of a 19-year-old, in childhood, in being told what my spiritual path was, and fearing the damnation of hell for even small infringements, I had lost all sense of my personal rights, my right to choose, my right to say no, my right to pursue my happiness, to find my fulfillment, to experiment with life and see what worked for me, to actually be happy. And what I want to emphasize is that finding these rights, that personal power of choice and to protect myself and all those things, didn't happen in one final moment where I went from powerless to powerful and confident. I found bits and pieces of power over time. Like all those statements that I just read, I gathered little pieces of different statements and embodied them more as time went on, and then found pieces of new ones, right? And I'm still finding them. And I'll provide some examples. The fact that I even left my church at the age of 30 against the strength of 28-ish years of teaching that I would be lost and I would go to hell if I did that, meant that even when I didn't know myself, I was embodying the power to choose. I knew something there wasn't right for me, and I went against everything I'd been taught, and I chose my own path. And then further down the road, a different kind of choice. One day I had a realization that if I wanted to be happy and fulfilled, no one else was going to make that happen for me. I had to take charge of my own journey and make choices that would champion my own wants and my dreams. So these were choices of career and education and what I spend my time on. This was my power to choose what my path of fulfillment would be. As time went on, I was also beginning to heal some of my past pain, and then I began to find a sense of my own spiritual path. So this is the right to healing and health, the right to address my own needs, and the right to find my own spirituality. And then I remember a time when I found my personal power to express my experience and my needs in my marriage. And that one took a full year and a half of thinking and healing and working up my courage to be able to do that. And I was still very scared when I did it. So that's one thing to remember. It's not that as you reclaim your power, you do any of it without fear. You've never had any practice at this. If you've been living in a state of powerlessness, it takes practice. There's no way to get around that. And the more you practice, the more confident you'll feel. And then you'll have that tool in your toolbox, right? And you can use it in all these other circumstances as well. And then not long ago, learning how I give myself away to helping others before I think of my own self and my needs, and realizing I have the right to pour energy into my own life, the power to take care of my own needs before helping others, the power to say no to requests that I can't fulfill, and even say no to my own tendencies when they're not helping me. And there was one day when a particular conflict came that brought up all the fear and the feelings that were around my parents' divorce, and later my loss of community from the church and my rejection by friends. And in that moment, I decided I was tired of feeling defensive and scared of rejection and powerless. And I leaned into the feelings with curiosity. And I learned that I could be myself in conflict too. That when someone is angry or having a difficult time with something about me, I didn't have to lose the connection to me. I didn't have to feel stuck and powerless ever again. I no longer had to be the victim because I had practiced, and I could say what I felt and ask for what I needed and be the champion and protector I never had. You too can find your power again, in bits and pieces, as you become aware of what you have lost, and then the possibilities for your life that might still exist. Let yourself lean into the feelings and see what might be there for you. Thank you for listening today, and I hope that listening has helped you increase compassion, both for yourself and for others. And as always, if you have further questions or comments, I invite you to comment on YouTube or send me a DM on Instagram at Sacred Self Guide. I'll link those below. And I'll see you next week when we go a little deeper again.